We use the word collapse too loosely. We use it when the stock market dips 10%. We use it when inflation ticks up. We use it when a single bank fails. But in economic history, a collapse is something fundamentally different from a recession. A recession is a storm. A collapse is a change in the climate. A recession is cyclical. It is part of the breathing of a healthy economy. A collapse is structural. It is the breaking of the spine. What we are witnessing today, the concentration of the stock market into a handful of AI companies, the explosion of sovereign debt to levels not seen since World War II, and the total detachment of asset prices from reality, is not the sign of a cycle turning. It is the sign of a structure breaking. Welcome to the Financial Coin Historian. Today, we are putting aside the daily news cycle to analyze the anatomy of the end. We are going to break down the mechanics of catastrophic economic failure. We will look at the theories of Hyman Minsky and Irving Fisher, not as academic exercises, but as roadmaps for what is happening right now. We will look at the specific trigger points, from a chip factory in Taiwan to a bond auction in Washington, that could turn a correction into a catastrophe. This is not about if the economy will slow down. This is about how the economy collapses. To understand how the collapse happens, you must first understand why it comes as a surprise. The most dangerous moment in any economy is not when things look bad. It is when they look stable. This is the core insight of Hyman Minsky, an economist who was ignored for most of his life until the 2008 crisis proved him right. Minsky argued that stability breeds instability. Minsky described a progression that every economy goes through. It starts with hedge financing. This is the safe zone. Borrowers, whether they are families buying homes or corporations building factories, have enough cash flow to pay back both the interest and the principal of their loans. The economy is grounded in reality. But as stability continues, confidence grows. Banks want to lend more. Investors want higher returns. We move to the second stage, speculative financing. In this stage, borrowers have enough cash flow to pay the interest, but not the principal. They are betting that they can refinance the debt later, or that the asset they bought will go up in value. They are no longer paying off debt. They are rolling it over. Then comes the final, fatal stage, Ponzi Financing. This is where the current global economy resides. In Ponzi Financing, the borrower does not have enough cash flow to pay the principal or the interest. They are borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money they already borrowed. They are entirely dependent on asset prices rising forever. If the housing market, the stock market, or the bond market stops going up for even a moment, they're instantly insolvent. We see this today in the commercial real estate sector where empty office towers are refinanced with new loans because they cannot generate the rent to pay the old ones. We see it in the US government, which is borrowing trillions just to pay the interest on its $36 trillion debt. The system feels stable because the prices of assets, stocks, homes, bonds are high. But Minsky warned us. Asset prices are volatile while debt liabilities are fixed. Your stock portfolio can drop 50% in a week. Your mortgage balance stays the same. When the gap between falling asset values and fixed debt becomes too wide, you hit what is now known as the Minsky Moment. It is a sudden, violent collapse of asset values that exposes the insolvency of the entire system. So, what triggers the Minsky Moment? In a fragile system, it can be anything, but right now there is a specific structural bottleneck that threatens to bring the whole house of cards down. The stock market has been on a tear, largely driven by the Magnificent Seven tech companies, and specifically by the explosion of artificial intelligence. Investors are pouring money into Nvidia, Microsoft, and Apple, assuming that AI is the future engine of the global economy. But this growth has a single physical choke point. Nvidia does not make its own chips. Apple does not make its own chips. They design them. The actual manufacturing of the world's most advanced semiconductors, the 3 nanometer and 4 nanometer chips that power AI, is done almost exclusively by one company, TSMC, Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company. This creates a terrifying fragility. The entire valuation of the US stock market, the entire future of the AI economy, rests on a single island that is the flashpoint of the greatest geopolitical rivalry of the 21st century. If China were to blockade or invade Taiwan, a scenario that US intelligence warns is becoming more plausible by 2027, the supply of these advanced chips would stop instantly. There is no backup. TSMC's factories cannot be moved overnight. The new fabs being built in Arizona are years behind schedule and lack the specialized supply chains and talent found in Taiwan. If TSMC goes offline, Nvidia's revenue goes to zero. Apple's production stops. The AI boom evaporates. The trillions of dollars in market capitalization tied to these companies would vanish. This is the classic exogenous shock that triggers a Minsky moment. It is not a slow decline. It is a sudden cardiac arrest of the global tech economy. Once the trigger is pulled, whether it is a war in Taiwan, a spike in oil prices, or a failure in the bond market, the economy enters the phase of mechanical collapse. This is best described by the economist Irving Fisher as the debt-deflation spiral. This is the nightmare scenario that central banks fear more than anything else. When asset prices fall, everyone tries to sell at the same time to pay off their debts. But when everyone sells, prices fall further. This creates a paradox. The more debtors pay, the more they owe. How is that possible? Because as they sell assets, houses, stocks, factories, to raise cash, the value of the remaining assets drops, but the nominal value of their debt stays the same. The real burden of the debt increases because the currency is becoming more valuable relative to the assets. This spirals out of control. Liquidation. Distressed selling crashes prices. Currency contraction. As loans are paid off or defaulted on, the money supply shrinks. Fall in prices. A general deflation in the price of goods and services sets in. Bankruptcy. Businesses fail, leading to mass unemployment. Loss of confidence. People hoard cash, stopping the circulation of money. In this environment, monetary policy becomes impotent. The Federal Reserve can cut interest rates to zero, but if everyone is insolvent, no one will borrow. You cannot push on a string. In 2008, the private sector collapsed and the government bailed it out. But in the next collapse, the government is the risk. The U.S. federal debt is over 122% of GDP. Interest payments on this debt are now higher than the entire defense budget. This is what is known as debt saturation. The government has exhausted its fiscal space. If a recession hits, tax revenues will fall and the deficit will explode. But unlike in the past, the government cannot simply borrow more without spiking interest rates. Bond vigilantes, investors who refuse to buy government debt at low rates, will demand higher yields. This leads to the ultimate terminal risk pathway. The government will face a binary choice: sovereign default austerity, admit it cannot pay/spending, default on promises, Social Security, Medicare, and crash the economy into a depression to clear the debt. Hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve prints money to buy the government's debt because no one else will. This monetizes the debt, destroying the value of the currency. History, from Rome to Weimar Germany, suggests governments almost always choose inflation. They prefer to destroy the currency rather than admit bankruptcy. An economic collapse is never just about money, it is about society. When the economy breaks, the social contract breaks. Research shows that financial crises lead to severe political polarization. The center collapses. Voters turn to the hard right or the hard left. We see the rise of populism, the search for scapegoats, and the fragmentation of governance. If the U.S. economy collapses, the political gridlock in Washington will likely prevent any coherent response. We could see a scenario where the federal government is paralyzed, unable to pass budgets or bailouts, leading to a disorderly unraveling of the social safety net. So, this is how the economy collapses. It starts with a long period of stability that encourages reckless borrowing, Ponzi finance. It builds a structural fragility where the entire system depends on a few concentrated assets, AI tech, and government debt. It is triggered by a shock, a war, a supply chain break, or a loss of trust. It accelerates through a debt deflation spiral where selling assets makes the debt burden heavier. And it ends with the destruction of the currency as the government tries to print its way out of the trap. The signs are all around us: the inverted yield curve, the concentration of the stock market, the explosion of debt. The system is flashing red. The only question left is not if it will happen, but when. And more importantly, when the music stops, will you be holding real assets or just paper promises? This is the financial coin historian. History has shown us the pattern. Now it is up to you to read the signs.